Hi. Time to know the definition for each phase of ADM in high level. Don't bother if you are not able to connect everything now, as Philip and his team will crack each ADM phases while working for the use case in hand. The preliminary phase describes the preparation and initiation activities required to create an architecture capability, including customization of the TOGAF framework and definition of architecture principles. Specifically, the preliminary phase is where definitions are established for, like, what the enterprise is. What are the architecture principles? The framework to be used, evaluating the enterprise architecture maturity, etc. Architecture vision starts with receipt of a request for architecture work. Objectives here are to develop a high-level vision of the capabilities and business value delivered by the proposed enterprise architecture. The target is to gain approval for a statement of architecture work that defines the program of works to develop and deploy the proposed architecture. This section describes the development of a business architecture to support the agreed architecture vision. Here you describe how the enterprise needs to operate to achieve the business goals, and respond to the strategic drivers set out in the architecture vision. The information systems architecture describes how it will enable the business architecture and the architecture vision. The technology architecture shows how it enables the logical and physical data components and the architecture vision. Based on the gaps in phases B, C, and D, you generate the initial complete version of the architecture roadmap in this phase. You can also determine whether an incremental approach is required, and if so, to identify transition architectures that will deliver continuous business value. Phase F is where we create an implementation and migration plan. Here you, in cooperation with portfolio and project managers, you have to finalize architecture roadmap. Then you also need to finalize the supporting implementation and migration plan, making sure that it is coordinated with the enterprise change management approach and the overall change portfolio. Finally, ensure the value and cost of work packages and transition architectures is understood by stakeholders. Phase G is where all the information for successful management of the various implementation projects is brought together. In parallel is the execution of the development process, where the actual development starts happening. Here we ensure conformance with the target architecture by implementation projects. We also perform appropriate architecture governance functions for the solution and any implementation-driven architecture change requests in this phase. Phase H ensures that the architecture achieves its original target business value, by managing changes to the architecture in a cohesive and architected way. Here we ensure three important points. Point 1 is, we maintain and follow the architecture lifecycle. Point 2 is, we work within the architecture governance framework, and finally the enterprise architecture capability meets current requirements. The requirements management circle at the center of the ADM graphic reminds us that ADM is continuously driven by the requirements management process. In this phase we keep ensuring that the requirements management process is sustained and operates for all ADM phases. We need to manage architecture requirements identified during any execution of the ADM cycle or a phase. In this phase we also need to ensure that relevant architecture requirements are available for use by each phase.